Even after days, the terrible rain did not stop. The trenches had turned into mere mud holes, always with a few inches of water at the bottom. It was Augustus' turn to keep watch that night. Although the never-ceasing sound of shrapnel and machine gun replaced the nightingale's song, most soldiers slept due to the sheer exhaustion. Augustus himself was slowly pacing around, the eyes fixed on potential places the enemy might use for a raid to escape the urge to close his eyes. War had dragged on long enough for the man to stop being kept awake by adrenaline as soon as violent action ended. Sleep was very precious those days, and boredom in moments of inaction was killing one's vigilance quickly. A faint rumble made the soldier stop and look around. It hadn't sounded like the typical sounds of guns, and there hadn't been an explosion either. Straining his ears, he kept listening for anything through the heavy rain. Nothing. Thinking himself to be half asleep, he discarded the notion he got and returned to observing the abandoned trench. It wasn't before he uttered a curse about one of his feet sinking several inches into the muddy ground that he realized. And as if to confirm the dreaded assumption, the rumbling sounded again. The slight distortion of the structure made his stomach lurch as he sprinted to the dugout where some of his comrades rested. Storming into the cave of dirt, he yelled at the figures in the semi-darkness. "The trench is collapsing!" The fear in his voice must have been more than evident, for his fellow Englishmen sprang up and towards him at once. Augustus was already greeted by the flood of water and dirt caused by the constant rain. Running was nearly impossible, for the soldiers quickly sank into the ground, up to their ankles, even knees. There was no hope to escape into the direction of safety, for every exit to the English side was far, too far to be reached before being swallowed by the flood. Thinking quickly, Augustus saw that there was but one chance of escape. They had to climb out into the wastelands and hope the Germans would not see them. Among the men struggling for survival was John, one of the people Augustus had met at the front and befriended. Seeing the other man struggling to get out of the mud, Augustus dragged him to the ladder. Having reached safer haven above, he turned to help his friend, yet the flood was faster, ripping away the ladder and capturing his friend, who desperately held onto whatever he could find to not be carried away and drowned. "Take my hand!" he yelled into the night, ignoring the danger of their ruckus. Throwing himself into the mud, he reached out to grab whatever he could, managing to take his friend by the collar and the shoulder. His arms felt like being ripped off each moment, but the fear in his friend's pale face gave him new strength. Augustus wouldn't let go, no matter what. John deserved better. This wasn't the day he died. Not there. Not like this. Another soldier was already there to help haul out his comrade. A few others had not been that fortunate, and their terrified screams were quickly silenced by the rumbling mass of debris. Shaking from exhaustion, they got to their feet to find a safe way into a safer trench. Taking John by the arm, he led the way. "Let's hope the soldier fell silent as something whistled past him, and was followed by a dull impact. A faint tremble went through his friend's body before he grew limp and swayed. He wanted to prevent the body from falling into the muddy depths he'd just protected him from, as the men who had helped him pushed him to the ground. When the enemy snipers didn't fire again, they sprung up to make for some ditch or other protection. The words he tried to utter remained stuck in his throat as the impact hit him through the rush of adrenaline. It wasn't supposed to be like that. John wasn't supposed to die like that, in the dark, covered in mud and unable to defend himself. Still running from invisible bullets, Augustus took his musket and turned around to where he believed the snipers sat. "You bloody cowards!" he screamed into the night, firing into the distance, imagining with each time that some unfortunate soldier was hit. He pictured the lifeless body sway and fall as John said, and he would have kept standing and yelling and shooting there until someone would have shot him, had it not been for the other soldier who dragged him along again. "You're no use to your friend if you die while shooting senselessly in your anger," the other man uttered briskly, with as much reproach as sympathy in his voice. Augustus obeyed without a word, seeing the futility of his outbreak. The hole his friend had left filled with hatred nonetheless. a fire he would never be able to quench. Augustus stood in front of a cross he had erected himself for the ones he lost along the way. His thoughts revolved around John for the dozenth time, replaying in his head like an ugly movie. He shook his head, trying to get rid of the unwanted memories. Gently he swiped with his hand over the cross. It's time, my friends. I have to go home. Forgive me that I couldn't save you. His heart grew heavy with the grief he felt, recalled by the many men lost forever. Silence settled as he struggled for the right words. Words he would never be able to find, no matter how long he would stand there. He knew if he left now or in 10 years he would regret it. For the things he felt he was unable to put into words. It all sounded hollow and meaningless to him. Therefore it had to be meaningless to the dead as well. Taking off his hat, he stared into the distance. His hatred had burned out at that moment. He felt alone and tired and confused, and he wasn't sure if he shouldn't have died somewhere along the way too. He wasn't sure how he was supposed to carry on back home. The close brotherhood was gone, and the unknown world of civilians was waiting, devoid of the trust and love that had been self-evident among strangers at the front. But he owed it to the dead and to the living to keep marching. Forgive me.